So, are you a member of the LDS Church, or thinking of going on a mission, or just investigating the church, or for some reason you've got questions or items on the shelf that you're wondering about, that you've heard about, certain issues, and you're looking for a good source to get honest information? And maybe you've noticed that LDS.org doesn't actually give you the whole story. Well, you come to the right place. In this video, I'm going to cover several issues in some detail and also direct you to my channel, in which I have many videos that get very specific on certain issues that are problematic to the assertion that an all-knowing, unchanging, perfect God is guiding the church through revelation, and that the scriptures were inspired by him, even though they contradict each other. So, as well as the fact that LDS history is filled with contradiction, cover-up, whitewashing, and in general is very problematic to the stated assertion of brethren. So, it's factual. We document things. I document things, and I show you where to get the information so you can evaluate it yourself. Then, if you feel praying about it helps, that's great. The church tells us in the essays that they want you to believe that there's no way to figure it out on your own. The only way to do it is to pray. And then if you don't get the answer from God, well, you must not be righteous enough. At least that seems to be what the inference is. We'll present factual evidence out of the scriptures in primary source documents, and you evaluate it as you please. This will be more about fact than opinion. I do have a great deal of experience in LDS doctrine and studying the church's history. I've got a fair amount, and as far as this goes, I think that you're at the right place to get introduced to a lot of really good information. So pay attention. I exhort you to give strict heed to this video. The LDS Church, or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church, although there are many Mormon denominations, claims to have divine authority, that the leaders speak for Jesus Christ. The church holds that Jesus Christ is an all-knowing, perfect God, unchanging, and guides the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints through living prophets, that it has been restored to the earth as the fullness of the gospel in the dispensation of the fullness of times. This is quite an assertion. So there are many people that leave the church for reasons other than just wanting to sin, although most are labeled that way by church leaders, it seems. First off, what are some of these issues? Now, subject number one, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints started off with Joseph Smith, Jr., publishing the Book of Mormon in March of 1830. The story he relates with this bringing forth of the Book of Mormon, essentially, as you know, possibly, is that a divine messenger directed him to golden plates, which represented the record of peoples who emigrated to the Americas from the Middle East, groups specifically coming over at about the time of the Tower of Babel, 2200 BC, about 150 years after the flood of Noah is said to have had in the book of Genesis, which is also upheld in Mormon doctrine and scripture. Following these people living and then destroying each other in a civil war, the Book of Mormon relates the story of another civilization, or a couple of civilizations, that stem from an emigration at about 600 BC from Jerusalem, with an additional group coming very close to that same time from Jerusalem, supposedly with members of King Zedekiah's family who survived the Babylonian assault on Jerusalem. The Book of Mormon therefore assumes a belief in the New Testament, and the Old Testament, as being basically the Word of God. However, the Book of Mormon states that the great and abominable church, which is basically describing the Catholic Church, in 1 Nephi chapter 13, has altered the scriptures. Therefore, they are not dependable, and they are subject to reinterpretation and retranslation through LDS prophets, starting with Joseph Smith and ending with Joseph Smith, apparently. So we have the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. Now, knowing these things, what are some issues that people have with the ability to believe? Well, first of all, you've got the Bible. So I'm not going to get real deep into that at this moment. I will say that most people, many people, or Christian people, call the Bible the Word of God and seem not to question its authenticity at all. Even though it is not one book, it is a collection of many writings, the Old Testament apparently from Israelite or Jewish people who wrote the various books, usually under the names of, specific prophets, such as Moses. And then the New Testament, which has various people writing under pen names of characters in the stories of the Gospels, for instance, who were probably, many of them possibly dead, if they ever lived, by the time these Gospels were written, or other such books. Some people feel that they are inventions of the Romans, as the Gospel conveniently creates a pacifist Jewish leader in Jesus Christ, rather than the warlike Messiah that the Jews would expect with their own culture. So the Book of Mormon, some people point to issues with the translation itself, but if we go issues with the translation being done and how it was done, let's look at how it was done. In the Book of Mormon are described magic spectacles. The word magic is not used. Spectacles prepared by the Lord with certain stones that someone would have put together in a silver bow, supposedly. And Joseph Smith said these were prepared for translating the Book of Mormon, which was apparently written in the language of Reformed Egyptian. First-hand accounts from people who were his scribes happened to say that he was actually looking into his hat at a magic stone, a seer stone, with his face put in the hat to darken the light so that light would emanate from a brown, smooth stone that would function possibly somewhat like your cell phone would now. A smartphone, an iPhone, a digital seer stone, except for you have a clear, screen, like an LCD screen or something. Maybe that's outdated. A brown rock is a little more difficult to believe. It's more difficult to believe than a crystal ball, since those tend to be clear. And were also popular at the time, and maybe they're both popular now still. I don't know anyone that has a seer stone. They are all digital at this point. But magic is practiced, and witchcraft is practiced, wizardry is practiced, Freemasonry is practiced, and other occult things are practiced in our day as they were in the time of Joseph Smith. He had a reputation, as we will find in some of the videos that I have done, in which I include primary source materials to document, from friendly sources to Joseph Smith, not necessarily all friendly, but including family, friends, and associates, of his magical involvement, previous to him saying that he was translating golden plates. This doesn't really seem to square with what most Christians would be believable, as far as God calling a prophet who was also a magician and a necromancer, which necromancy was practiced in conjunction with treasure seeking, as far as making sacrifices of animals in the middle of the night in magic circles drawn with magic knives around treasure being sought for, where they were digging with a party of individuals. This is documented. You can believe it or not believe it, but I have multiple videos on that where you can evaluate the material. Now, the material in the Book of Mormon has been challenged just because much of it looks like it could have been copied from various sources, such as books popular in Joseph Smith's day. Ethan Smith, not related to Joseph Smith that we're aware of, who lived not far away and actually was the pastor in the church which Oliver Cowdery attended, as I have read, published a book called A View of the Hebrews, which seems to have some material that is similar in many ways to some of the things that are in the Book of Mormon. Certain other books are cited, I believe, such as the Late War and First Book of Napoleon. Searching into these things, into the copycat issue, tends to play in to the LDS apologists' trap, I might say, laid by Hugh Nibley, which was basically try and prove how Joseph Smith came up with the Book of Mormon. If you can't absolutely prove how it happened, then it must have happened by God giving him the translation just as it is spoken, since he only had 3 years of formal schooling. Of course, they neglect to mention that his father, taught school and they had a library and etc. And he was probably self-educated very much, which happens to be, in many people's opinion, much better than what's offered in a lot of schools. But the assertion is that it's just not possible for him to come up with these things without divine help. Well, he practiced magic, and if he was using a Seer Stone, why couldn't he be channeling from another source? I haven't seen that argument discussed. Anyway, these things don't prove one way or another if the church is built on truth or not. However, they do bring suspicion. What we can do is look at the Book of Mormon itself. We can see what it says and what other LDS scriptures say about various subjects and see if they contradict each other. Because if Jesus Christ is revealing these things to Joseph Smith, as Jesus Christ supposedly did affirm in a revelation given in which is canonized in the LDS Doctrine and Covenants, section 1, in which Jesus Christ is saying that the Book of Mormon was translated by his power given to Joseph Smith and that it is absolutely correct. Also, that the revelations given to Joseph Smith are correct, and that whatever Joseph Smith says in the name of the Lord basically is the word of God. The quote there being, "Whether by mine own voice or the voice of my servants, it is the same." This one here, the Book of Commandments of the Church of Christ, which is the church that Joseph Smith founded. And I've looked at the Book of Commandments for the Church of the Latter-day Saints, which was the church's second name. Now, the Book of Commandments is kind of interesting because these revelations are supposed to be word for word quoted from Jesus Christ. And what we find is apparently Jesus didn't say what they said he said. They just, canned that version, put some new things in there that gave Joseph Smith more power usually and authority in the church, and then called it the Doctrine and Covenants, and added on from there various other revelations. Pretty sketchy. If it was true the first time, then it couldn't be true the second time. If it's true the second time, then it wasn't true in the first place. I mean, that's a problem like with the Book of Mormon. Book of Mormon, was it true? Jesus Christ said it was, supposedly, in section 1 of the D&C, which used to be the preface to the Book of Commandments. Said he gave Joseph Smith the power to translate it correctly, and it was true, correct. 3,000 and some corrections or so later, there were problems. Problems? Didn't Joseph look in his hat, peeping and muttering, like Isaiah said was condemned of the Lord? And he copied into the Book of Mormon, or wrote it in there, and Nephi had copied it onto the plates, from the plates of Laban into the Book of Mormon, if you want to go that route. But he wasn't looking at the golden plates. He was looking at his seer stone in his hat. According to Emma, his wife, Martin Harris, and David Whitmer, Oliver Cowdery said he was looking at the Urim and Thummim in his hat, but he used the term interchangeably, and the Urim and Thummim was just something basically Oliver Cowdery started saying. It's not what it says in the Book of Mormon. It calls them like interpreters, spectacles, basically the magic glasses. Yeah, so he supposedly got things word for word correct, and they wouldn't disappear off the rock until they were written down correctly. So how'd they make mistakes? When they did come up with all kinds of, not just the doctrinal mistakes, which are a major difference in terms of like Trinitarian doctrine versus, what's more in line with what's taught now in section 130 about the Godhead, but all kinds of grammatical stuff. Jesus just couldn't speak English very well on that Seer Stone, except for, of course, the parts that were out of Isaiah and then, the New Testament. Then he did just fine. His English worked then. Seer Stone worked just fine for the parts that seemed to be word for word out of the Smith's King James Bible. And the stuff from the New Testament, that's another story too. Why do we have that hundreds of years before it occurred, quoting Paul and Peter and others, word for word? Pretty strange, huh? It almost sounds like a 19th century person was getting it out of the family Bible that it existed word for word in. Just a coincidence. Nothing to worry about. Another big problem with the Book of Mormon translation is, in addition to King James things coming through word for word, even stuff that was in the New Testament long after the things were supposed to have, been written by Nephi, not Moroni, there were things that Joseph Smith later retranslated in the Bible in the Joseph Smith translation, changing the corrupted Catholic version into the Lord's pure word in the Bible the way it supposedly used to be before the Catholic Church got a hold of these manuscripts. The problem is, how did they find their way in their corrupted form into the Book of Mormon? Yeah. Let's move on. Like I said, the scriptures are the same problem. Okay, here are more magical tools. Divining rod. Yeah, Oliver Cowdery was a divining rod guy. Joseph Smith Sr. was, and it's mentioned, the rod of Aaron, and then they changed that to the gift of Aaron later in the Doctrine and Covenants, trying to get rid of the witchcraft or magic, whatever you want to call it, because it doesn't look good. Kind of like the Seer Stone thing didn't look that good anymore, so they kind of tried to avoid letting people know about that. I think Michael Quinn talked about that in his book, Early Mormonism and the Magic World View. He's a BYU professor, had special access to, some of the vaults, church's vaults and stuff. Got excommunicated. They didn't like what he was revealing. Now, after there's so much public pressure, on LDS.org they got the brown Seer Stone pictured. Okay. About it, James Strang. Martin Harris followed James Strang, but so did at least one of the other three witnesses. I think they all three did. He had a Seer Stone. Joseph Smith gave him a letter, said, if anything happens to me, you're in charge. Not Sidney, not Brigham, you. Was in his handwriting, apparently convinced his mom, Emma, brother William the Apostle, his sisters. His whole family, joined that church that lived. Samuel died right after Joseph and Hiram. Some folks say it had to do with the Danites murdering him on behalf of Brigham Young. That's unproven as far as I know. Hosea Stout was caring for him. Many of the people there in Nauvoo, some of them say that there were people being poisoned by a white powder that the Danites administered to the enemies of Joseph Smith or Brigham Young. Anyway, James Strang was very convincing, and the Smith family followed him after Joseph's death. So did the presiding bishop, Edward Partridge, and the stake president of Nauvoo. Brother Marks, Joseph's stake president. They were all convinced this man was the real thing, the real deal. He had a Seer Stone. Said he got the plates of Laban, I think, translated them, found them in the ground, an angel, all kinds of strikingly similar things to the Joseph Smith story, which was also strikingly similar to some other people's stories, in case you ever read those. A lot of Joseph Smith stuff is strikingly similar to other people doing other things. Anyhow, Martin Harris followed him. I think Whitmer did, and maybe Cowdery. Just like they followed the other girl with the Seer Stone. When Sidney Rigdon and Joseph Smith took off to Canada after the Kirtland Anti-Banking Safety Society folded, which was supposed to be a bank, but they couldn't get a bank charter, and a lot of stuff looks pretty fraudulent with that. And they took off. So everybody started following a 16-year-old girl with a Seer Stone. You might have read in the Doctrine and Covenants where Hiram Page, one of the Smith family friends, I believe, had a Seer Stone, was receiving revelations that seemed to be problematic for Joseph Smith, so he came up with a revelation that said, only I get Seer Stone revelations that have anything to do with everybody in the church. So, sorry, pal. You're out. Seer Stones were just as popular, probably, as crystal balls and maybe divining rods. Magic was in the air, people. Alrighty. Martin Harris. He followed all kinds of different people, including Jesus, the shapeshifter, who turned into a deer, and walked alongside of Martin Harris for about 3 miles on a dirt road talking to him. Jesus is a shapeshifter. David Icke would be impressed. Okay, so are we seeing something with these three witnesses? They're a little bit, gullible, maybe, is what some people might say. There's who knows. What's wrong with shape-shifting deers? They did choose the 12 apostles, mind you. And Joseph Smith called them wicked, each separately. The Lord supposedly called Martin Harris wicked when the 116-page thing happened, and, Joseph Smith gave us a revelation that it was the devil trying to cause a problem so that the people hiding it would change the words on it, and then when he retranslated the same things, they change it. That's probably because it was written in disappearing ink or something, right? Or they had perfect ink erasers, and then somebody could, after erasing the ink that it was written in smudge-proof, come up,
with copying Martin Harris's handwriting, and maybe Emma's was some of it, who knows, can't remember for sure. Copying the handwriting exactly and placing different words in exactly the same spaces to change it. Sounds pretty likely. They probably had a magic potion that would erase the ink. Somehow that story doesn't really fly too well in my book. Maybe I'm just skeptical. They call people critics if they disagree. They love the name-calling thing, don't they? Sometimes it's helpful to have some clips that other people have done. And here's one that's very professional, describing some of the issues this man had with the church and certain beliefs that seem to be problematic, or that are at least known in Mormonism and somewhat controversial at times. This is called The Way of the Mister.
I'm the writer, director, and creator of the Mr. Deity Show. Well, for the first 27 years of my life, I was a Latter-day Saint, a Mormon. I left the church in 1993. Yeah, that's an understatement. My life has changed in some pretty dramatic ways. How has it changed? I no longer believe in the golden plates or in Reformed Egyptian. I no longer believe that the Hebrews were a white and delightsome people 600 years before Christ. I no longer believe that men who claim to speak for God reveal anything but their own arrogance and self-delusion. I no longer believe in three heavens. I no longer believe in excommunicating historians whose only fault is telling the truth. I no longer believe that God is such a poor communicator that he said horse but meant deer. I no longer believe that a burning in my bosom is any indication of truth or value. I no longer believe that Jesus visited the Americas after his resurrection. I no longer believe that an institution which changes its doctrines as our culture evolves is in any way directed by a transcendent being. I no longer believe that other men understand God better than I do and speak for and or with him on a regular basis. I no longer believe that the Native Americans are Hebrews. I no longer believe in a place called Adam-on-Diamond, nor do I believe that the Garden of Eden was in Jackson County, Missouri. I no longer believe in taking oaths of secrecy. I no longer give 10% of my gross income to a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I no longer believe that a stone knife is a good substitute for what the Book of Mormon very specifically calls a steel sword. I no longer believe that black people are black because they fought less valiantly in some war in heaven. I no longer believe that polygamy was ever a divine institution or that God may have many wives. I no longer believe in prophets who taught that there were people on the moon. I no longer believe that God is merely an exalted man with a body of flesh and bone. I no longer believe that women are unqualified or ill-suited for leadership positions in any organization. I no longer believe that God once lived on a planet just as we do now. I no longer believe that there's a God who punishes people by darkening their skin. I no longer believe that an ordinary Egyptian funerary text from the Common Era contains the writings of Father Abraham. I no longer believe that I can become a god with my own universe and planets and people to worship me. I no longer believe in being vicariously baptized for dead people. I no longer believe that our God is merely one God in a potentially infinite series of gods. I no longer believe that dark-skinned people can become light-skinned people by living the Mormon gospel. I no longer believe that God lives on or near a star or planet named Kolob. I no longer believe that placing one's face in a hat containing a seer stone is a reliable means of translating an ancient language. I no longer believe that my happiness is enhanced by my obedience to other men's ideas of how I should live my life. I'm Brian Dalton. I'm a writer. I'm a director. I'm a rational human being. And I'm a foreman. And I'm a foreman. And I'm a foreman.
Next, I wanted to, this one right here. I'm not involved with other women. I'll just get a bunch of people to sign a document that says I'm not. Even women that I'm involved with could sign it. Pretty sure Eliza Snow signed it. But, oh, John Taylor. That's a good one. He told people that he wasn't, there wasn't any polygamy. He was in Europe on a mission, said, no, there's no such thing as polygamy going on there. He had 12 wives at the time. Third president of the church. Highly honest. You just get up a petition that says you're telling the truth. That works. It's like you got up basically a petition of 11 witnesses to say that they'd seen the plates to present evidence for the book that became the evidence of him being a prophet, the Book of Mormon. Except for it's filled with contradictions, so the perfect God, Jesus, seems to have problems with keeping his story straight between the scriptures. And those things are clearly noted and shown in several of the videos.
So the church claims absolute authority descending from the Lord through Joseph Smith to his so-called successors in the church. There were various churches that sprang up at his death, but the Brighamite church, based in Salt Lake with the lovely temple we're looking at here, or the nice picture, anyway, is what we're talking about. So these scriptures, do they contradict each other? Are there contradictions that are in the LDS canon of scripture? Yes, there are. And I've got certain videos that point that out specifically. And other people have documented many of these things as well. So would an all-knowing, perfect, and unchanging God be contradicting himself? Does that make sense? No, it doesn't. So that's a major issue. We're looking at a picture of the temple here. Now this is the Salt Lake Temple. I've got pictures of lots of temples here. Maybe we'll take a look at a few. There's the San Diego Temple. Washington, D.C. Nice pictures here. That's either Provo or Orem. Oakland, D.C. again. And here we've got the Nauvoo Temple. This is an interesting temple. And it happens to have windows up there. And in those windows are pentagrams, which brings up some interesting thoughts. And some of them next to the windows are within circles and or Maltese crosses, which happens to show up also in Salt Lake City. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into that. You can do your own research. They've got an excuse for everything. But the occult definitely shows up in a lot of things within the LDS Church, which thing many times Christians have pointed out. So, the temple. The eternal marriage. The Latter-day Saints are known for certain doctrines. Polygamy was a big issue. How did it come to pass? Well, what's taught in Sunday school and what's called, in the gospel doctrine class specifically, is much different from what we find in many other original source materials. We see section 132 of the Doctrine and Covenants, which does, by the way, say that polygamy is doctrinal and that men become gods by obeying the Lord's commandment to enter into celestial marriage. We know that Brigham Young, who was second president of the church, stated, which is in the Journal of Discourses, in other words, kind of like the conference reports, which are considered scripture, and he was the president of the church, and he was emphatic in stating that a man must enter into polygamy, plural marriage, in order to become a god, which is what exaltation in the celestial kingdom in LDS doctrine is. Christians seem to have a problem with Mormon people saying that they can become gods. That's fine. Let the Christians have their arguments. No one says they have to agree. This is probably Logan or Manti. So within the temple, people are baptized for and in behalf of deceased relatives in order to bring the opportunity for them to accept an ordinance which is performed by people in the flesh on the earth. This seems to be sensible, allowing God's children to accept the gospel who didn't have the chance. Otherwise, they'd just be burning in hell, according to most Christian doctrine, so far as I understand it. People are married for time and all eternity, which is called being sealed together. However, this section 132, which these doctrines seem to stem, was never given to the church by Joseph Smith, and it was not canonized into the Doctrine and Covenants for many years after his death. Joseph Smith claimed that he did not practice any sort of plural marriage. Brigham Young married many women, especially right after Joseph Smith died, before going to Utah, before they were outside the boundaries of the United States. So all these marriages or sealings were completely illegal, in so much as they seem to constitute marriages. Joseph Smith took other men's wives unto him. They were sealed to him as wives. There are people who dispute what type of a relationship he had with them in the flesh. Not much can necessarily be proved one way or another, but so far as LDS doctrine is concerned, he stole these men's wives for all eternity. Whoever's sealed to these women for all eternity is their husband in eternity. So, in other words, all these guys got thrown under the bus, and Joseph took their wives for all eternity. there are certain LDS apologists that like to focus on, well, if you can't prove he had physical relations with them, what was the harm? Well, LDS doctrine says he stole them for time and all eternity. That's pretty bad. That destroys your entire purpose for being on the earth and having a family for eternity. So, that's a problem. That is discussed in some of the videos that I have done. I've done a number on polygamy, quite a few. I think what I'll do right now is take a look at some of the stuff I've got on YouTube, and you can kind of see a sample of what some of the issues are that we're discussing and that I get into a lot of detail on and document. So, was Joseph Smith honest about polygamy? Or what it's called polygamy? Was he honest? No, he was not. Did he break his covenants with his wife? Yes, he did. He did not cleave unto her, only forsaking all other women. So his claim basically is that God told him to break the terms of the contract upon which his wife agreed to marry him. Doesn't sound like a very honest or a God with much integrity, does it? He took other men's wives, and he married or was sealed to. Couldn't have been legally married to anyone besides his wife, because it was illegal in every state. Notwithstanding, he published the Articles of Faith, saying that he believed in being honest, true, chaste, benevolent, and obeying the laws of the land. Now here's my channel, and I'll just do a quick go through. Maybe it won't be that quick. Alright, so I started off here on the New Year's Day talking about testimony and what people will be doing on such a day. And now I've made the screen look different. Okay, and the second video here has a timeline on it and goes over certain revelations which Jesus Christ is supposed to have made in the Book of Mormon, the Book of Moses, and the Doctrine and Covenants regarding him having personal visitations with various prophets and appearing to them in the flesh. They in the flesh, he as a spiritual man. They conflict with each other. And I have several videos that happen to mention that, so the first one was right there.
So if you've wondered why you haven't found these conflicts in the scriptures, it's because they've been correlated right out in your lesson materials. They just put in the scriptures that go along with the lesson theme and eliminate issues of conflict. Same way the Jehovah's Witnesses do it with the Watchtower, and a few scriptures to augment it.
Moving up, we have the Gospel Topics essays. Here's one on race and priesthood. Now, I've redone that up near the top of this and made it a lot nicer. However, the topic in there, in these Gospel Topics essays, which are on LDS.org, which appear to be apologetics, meaning that they are arguing the point of the church as a lawyer would argue for his or her client, not as an essay that actually takes all points into consideration and gives an, fair and balanced assessment of something. However, that's what they basically claim they're doing, and in my video I show that they are not doing that, and also that they contradict themselves, absolutely and completely contradicting the scriptures, which they are, which they ignore. They ignore the scriptures, which happen to be the most pertinent items to the essay. They ignore them, even though they said they would be in-depth and straightforward. They were completely and totally dishonest, and that's clearly proven in the videos I've done on those. I think right here I'll interject again our good friend, the movie producer, who's done an excellent take or two on the race and priesthood issue.
Do you believe that dark skin is a punishment from God? A curse? No, neither do I. Unfortunately, many of our friends and neighbors belong to a religion which teaches that very thing. You know them as the Mormons. This is the Book of Mormon, the founding document of the Mormon Church. It tells the story of a group of Hebrews who came to the Americas supposedly around 600 BCE. Once here, they divided up into two groups. One good, the righteous Nephites. One bad, the wicked Lamanites. And just so nobody would be confused, God marked the wicked people with a sore cursing. Can we get a reading, Brother Bri-Bri? For as they, the wicked Lamanites, were white and exceedingly fair and delightsome, that they might not be enticing unto my people, the righteous Nephites, the Lord God did cause a skin of blackness to come upon them. And thus saith the Lord God, I will cause that they shall be loathsome unto thy people. Because we white and delightsome types really do find dark skin loathsome. And cursed shall be the seed of him that mixeth with their seed, for they shall be cursed even with the same cursing. And the Lord spake it, and it was done. And because of the cursing which was upon them, they did become an idle people, full of mischief and subtlety, and did seek in the wilderness for beasts of prey. Because everyone knows that dark skin makes you idle, full of mischief and subtlety, and gives you an uncontrollable urge to hunt. The Book of Mormon is a long book, and all throughout, the evil dark-skinned people, the wicked Lamanites, are warring with the good light-skinned people, the righteous Nephites. In the end, the bad guys win. The Lamanites wipe out the Nephites around 400 CE, and that was supposed to explain why there were dark-skinned people living here in the Americas when Columbus arrived. They were cursed with that dark skin by God. That's what I was taught as a child growing up Mormon.
Well, we have the Gospel Topics essays on LDS.org approved by the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, which specifically states that dark skin is not an indication of divine disfavor or a curse. So it absolutely contradicts the scriptures in the Book of Mormon, not just in 2nd Nephi that he was quoting, but also in Alma chapter 3, and taking a look at Moses chapter 7 combined with Abraham chapter 1, we have a very similar story.
Of course, I must admit that I haven't been completely fair here. The Mormon God is not a total mambo fella. He has provided a way for people with dark skin to rid themselves of their sore cursing. All they have to do is believe in the Mormon gospel, and soon their scales of darkness shall begin to fall from their eyes, and many generations shall not pass away among them, save they shall be a white and delightsome people. It's good to be white and delightsome. Oh, crap, I'm right in the sun. Courtesy flag, don't want to get the dark skin thing going. Yeah, this is the Mormon prophet? Yeah, it's the deity. All right, you know what? Stop groveling. I'm looking at the text here, and this white and delightsome thing is going to kill us. We got to change it to pure and delightsome. Well, that's really late in the book. I mean, who's going to read that far? The faithful can't even get past 2nd Nephi. I mean, you've read the thing, I assume. You did. You couldn't get past Alma. Well, you know, that's okay. I mean, you know, the Christians, they can't get through their book either. Yeah. Mark Twain really was right, huh? It's chloroform in print.
Let's go case in point here. I'm going to show you how to get to where we are here. Because even though the church told us that it was important to them for us to know where to go to get the truth, and that place was LDS.org, and that they were making it easy for us to find the truth, they wanted us to know their history. Actually, you haven't seen that yet, have you? I showed that in another video. So here we are, homepage of LDS.org. Let's see how important the Gospel Topics essays are. Let's see how much they want us to find them. We're on the homepage. Why it will all work out. Letting His love grow in your life. An invitation to prepare for upcoming devotional. Well, let me cut to the chase. You're not going to see anything that's inviting you to look at the Gospel Topics essays to find out that the church is basically completely dishonest. So, how would you find it? I already said you'd have to do a web search on why does Joseph Smith, retell his first vision 9 different ways, or how come he took other guys' wives, that sort of thing. So here we are. Site map. I'm clicking on it and go into the site map. You see, Bible, about conference, leadership biographies. Here's Gospel Topics right here. So I'll click on that. Gospel Topics. What does it say? Each topic includes a brief overview sharing what Latter-day Saints believe about the topic. And they have links to resources. Learn more about the role of the Holy Ghost in pursuit of truth. Oh, great, they want to distract us. Anything to keep us from really finding them. Now, featured topics: answering gospel questions, love, religious freedom. Oh, here's a little bit more. Keep in mind, the church people are master marketers. Does this look like they're trying to get you to look at the gospel topics essays, other than the one on love? Recognizing today that so much information about the church can be obtained from questionable and often inaccurate resources, the church started to publish things that were in-depth in 2013. They must want us to find them since they've hidden them. In the 1830s, the Lord told us to seek for wisdom. That means not just one set of opinions. It'll go on to tell us, and I'll let you read this yourself, or I've done this in the race and priesthood one as an intro. So he tells us that not all sources are equal, and so they're going to filter our information for us. But they're going to tell us they're just making it easy for us. That the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency have approved these essays. Right there, straightforward, in-depth essays on a number of topics. So we should think they're fair and balanced, covering the topic, in all ways, not just polemics or apologetics, one-sided argument. And they've made it easy for us because they want us to know history. So why are they hiding it? Why are there no, big shiny pictures that say, go check out our gospel topic essays? Because they tell us that the church isn't true, if we can think when we read them. Okay, church places great emphasis on knowledge and the importance of being well informed about church history and doctrine, practices, etc. You read that. So here we go. And I'm looking for the one on race and priesthood. So we've got these issues. First vision accounts. Yes, when he told a story 9 different ways and they're contradicting each other, it's a problem. But never mind, the essay will find something common in several of them and try to blend it into one believable story. Race and priesthood. But you'll need to pray about it. You won't be able to determine it otherwise, they'll tell you. It has to come through prayer. You can't figure anything out. I start off with the politically correct spiel here. How God loves all his children, created them equally. And then a diversion. Let's go look at the, prophets' testimonies. But wait a minute. We're very careful. We'll see. Read more. Okay. This will go on to tell us that people had various views there, and the prophets just kind of followed the crowd. Brigham Young was a crowd follower. Isn't that what prophets are supposed to do? Just follow the crowd? They're not supposed to speak out and say, we're supposed to do something different. But that's basically what they say, and you can read it yourself. Down here, the church today. Today, the church disavows the theories advanced in the past that black skin is a sign of divine disfavor. Is that a theory? Well, we'll look in the scriptures and see what they have to say. Oddly, they didn't mention the scriptures in here that relate to this. I mentioned one part of one scripture that says, all are like unto God. That's it. Okay, theories. They're only theories now. Advanced in the past that black skin is a sign of divine disfavor or a curse. So black skin is not a curse, it says. Or that it reflects unrighteous actions in a premortal life. In other words, there'd be some reason for cursing children when they come into this life with a black skin. And they had to have sinned in the premortal existence because it's obviously not fair just to curse an innocent child. So they must have been guilty somewhere. It must have been in the premortal existence, and that's been explained in depth by many apostles, Mark E. Peterson, John Taylor, Brigham Young, probably. Okay, and that mixed race marriages are a sin. Or that blacks or people of any other race or ethnicity are inferior in any way to anyone else. The church leaders today unequivocally condemn all racism, past and present in any form. Now we heard what was read, but we're going to go look and see it for ourselves. 2 Nephi chapter 5, and he had caused a cursing to come upon them, even a sore cursing because of their iniquity. For behold, they'd hardened their hearts against him, that they become like unto a flint. Wherefore, nice and bright here, as they were white and exceedingly delightsome, white and delightsome, that they might not be enticing unto my people, the Lord did cause a skin of blackness to come upon them. And thus saith the Lord, I will cause that they shall be loathsome unto thy people. Loathsome. Does that sound attractive? Unless they repent of their iniquities. And cursed shall be the seed of him that mixes with their seed. For they shall be cursed even with the same cursing. And the Lord spake it, and it was done. Okay, so they're cursed with the skin of blackness. Anyone who partakes of interracial marriage will have their children cursed. Okay? How's that go with what we just read in the Gospel Topic Essays? And because of their cursing which was upon them, they did become an idle people, full of mischief and subtly did seek in the wilderness for the beast, etc. Okay. Other scriptures in there, use other descriptive adjectives, that they were idle and basically lazy, worthless. They don't, use exactly those words, but it said it was a curse. Exactly opposite of what the brethren are saying there in the Gospel Topics essay. Exactly opposite of what it said. Okay. We have 3rd Nephi here. 3rd Nephi. Let's see what happens. They repented. The Lamanites became converted unto the Lord. 3rd Nephi chapter 2, verse 15. And their curse was taken from them, and their skin became white like unto the Nephites. And their young men and their daughters became exceedingly fair, and they were numbered among the Nephites, and they were called Nephites. This ended the 13th year. Okay, and you also heard the gentleman read that they were promised in the latter days they would become white after the Book of Mormon was translated, brought forth, after not many generations. Until Spencer Kimball was president of the church and decided that it was a mistranslation, got the Seer Stone out of the First Presidency vault or something, didn't explain it. It just came out in the New Scriptures as pure and delightsome instead of white and delightsome. As I've said before, he was head of the Indian Placement Program, where they took American Indian children away from their families, civilized them with good Latter-day Saints, indoctrinated them in the gospel, and he said they were several shades whiter than their family members because they were becoming so righteous, I guess. Weren't running around half naked on the reservation. But he didn't explain why. He was inferring they were turning white, but it wasn't happening fast enough, and so the scriptures just changed. So what we've seen here is that the brethren condemn all racism. The Lord did it, so they're condemning God. They said they're false theories, but they're in the scriptures, so that means the scriptures must not be true, meaning Joseph Smith is not a prophet. And if Joseph Smith is not a prophet, they got a problem, because they said the Book of Mormon's true, then Joseph's a prophet. If Joseph's a prophet, then the church is true. If the church is true, do whatever we say, pay your tithing, and go on missions, and clean the buildings, whatever. Go to seminary. Create more wealth for us. They've condemned the source of their own authority. They've said it wasn't true. Of course, they don't bother to reference it in the Gospel Topic essay, do they? I wonder why. The church today disavows the theories. These are theories, not scriptures, theories. Advanced in the past, that black skin is a sign of divine disfavor. We condemn all racism, in the past and present, in any form. We've condemned God. It said the Lord spake it and it was done. So, do we have a problem with the basis of the church? The keystone of the religion says that black skin was a cursing from God, and this says that's not true. It's a false theory. What basis of authority does the LDS Church have to take your money and your time and your labor and tell you to sacrifice all things so that you can get into the celestial kingdom with your family, to be happy forever, if they condemn the keystone of the religion as false, condemn the God for his actions as recorded in the so-called history of the Americas, which basically they say is not history anymore, in the DNA and the Lamanites essay. And I've done some on those, and you'll just have to go into my channel and watch these videos because they get a lot more in depth. Here we've kind of cut to the chase on this and seen the complete and total contradiction. So, why do people leave the church? Because they see there is a problem called dishonesty. The brethren are not ignorant of this. Obviously, they approve these essays. They're not idiots. They're all like, corporate lawyers and that sort of a thing, because they're the board of directors, undoubtedly, for the conglomerate of corporations that the church actually is, a multi-billion-dollar, corporate conglomerate. You don't see, cobblers in the first presidency and Quorum of the 12, do you? Never wonder why? Because it has nothing to do with righteousness. Obviously, it's an enormous business conglomerate, very profitable, and they actually here have condemned God according to their own scripture and called Joseph Smith essentially a false prophet, but avoided to reference any of that and just hope you don't read the scriptures. If they can give you enough correlated lesson materials that only use selected scriptures, not to include anything that would raise eyebrows, perhaps they can keep you dumbed down enough to keep paying your tithing and going on missions. Well, we've got more. Maybe it's anticlimactic unless you look at what Joseph Smith did in Nauvoo, the horrendousness of it, which is far beyond anything I've seen discussed. Okay.
Here are some having to do with points that brought up in the 50 Problems with the Mormon Church video. Here we've got multiple versions of the first vision. Okay, there are about 9 versions. If you haven't heard what they are, the church isn't going to tell you. On the church's website, they've got the official version, which wasn't published till 1842. Joseph Smith's family members never heard of such a thing as God the Father and Jesus Christ visiting Joseph. I've got a really good video on that I did not too long ago. Then we've got the Book of Abraham. I've got a new one on that as well. Lots of information. Lots of problems in there, in addition to the things you might see online, which have to do with the fact that the papyrus actually is now translated by people that speak Egyptian, and it had nothing to do with Abraham, and it wasn't published for about 1800 years after he was supposed to have lived. It had nothing to do with him. Mine also focus on the fact that the content of it is impossible to have been written 2000 BC, because there are things written that did not exist. There are many things that are flat wrong, didn't matter when it was, words with the wrong interpretation, words that didn't exist, places, all sorts of anachronisms, including linguistic and geographical. The book was written by someone who really didn't know what they were doing. Much about polygamy, or what's called polygamy, the plural relationships and so forth, which includes polyandry and basically brothels and concubinage, and calling it polygamy is really a euphemism to cover for what actually happened. Honesty of the presidents of the church. In here we show how they've, especially Gordon B. Hinckley, has publicly made statements which were absolutely and completely untrue and denied doctrines and so forth. How he and Joseph Fielding Smith have written materials for the church in which they knowingly misrepresented things and printed things were absolutely not true, which are documented. I'm able to document it with Joseph Fielding Smith. I haven't found a copy of the book that Gordon B. Hinckley wrote in which he did that absolutely and completely, but many things in there that he knew to be untrue. Here we got misleading LDS history, a lot on magic, Joseph Smith's magical practices, more polygamy things, and then showing how a girl called the Mormon, well, what does she call herself? She does what Mormons believe and calls herself the Mormon next door, and uses tactics and techniques that are actually rather deceptive, in my opinion, to get people to believe things. Tactics that the LDS Church seems to be good with and that are used in the media as well, to get people to believe things that are not true. And I actually go through and kind of show how she does it. And she pretends she's got evidence but doesn't, and then gains people's confidence and then says things that are absolutely untrue. And at any rate, go over that and the polygamy issues. There's a series we did on Joseph Jackson. I've redone that, and that's his account. He basically went undercover in Nauvoo and checked out the spiritual wife system, which is way worse than polygamy ever has been presented to be, and the Danites, which were a secret society, basically like illuminated Freemasonry, and what was kind of described in the Book of Moses and the Book of Mormon as a secret combination, worshiping Satan, etc., and using blood oaths to attain their wicked ends. And Joseph Smith established the Danites, although it's the church tries to tell us it was it Samson Avar, and they act like Joseph Smith just found out about it and disbanded it, which is baloney. But this account, and which is corroborated by other Mormons who were very honorable people, like the wife of Apostle Orson Pratt, Sarah Pratt, who also had issues with Joseph Smith hitting on her when her husband was gone on a mission, as he did with many women, especially wives and daughters of apostles. And some are shown as sealed to him, and others rebuffed him, such as Sarah Pratt. And the whole polygamy thing's just got so much stuff. Joseph Smith impregnating a 16-year-old orphan girl, and his wife throwing her out of the house. She was living with them. And we're supposed to believe that, this was God's will or something. That's something he commanded. This girl's name was Fanny Alger. She was 16 years old. She was an orphan staying in the Smith home, working as a nanny. And Joseph did impregnate her. There's testimony from Emma catching them in the barn, but she was, as people were quoted as saying, unable to continue to hide the results of her celestial relations with the prophet. The church shows Fanny as Joseph's first plural wife on Family Search, I believe it is, .org. So they're calling her a wife. He was never married to her. It was completely illegal. She was thrown out of the house pregnant with Joseph's child, Joseph and her child. So the child was fatherless. And so the church calls that marriage, calls that first wife. It was completely illegal. There was no sealing power even discussed, no Elijah, nothing like it. So what else? What else do we find in the polygamy files that get really interesting? The accounts of what occurred in Nauvoo, people like Sarah Pratt and Joseph Jackson, who probably been maligned by people like Joseph Smith and those who stayed loyal to him without cause. But that's just a tactic that's used. Attack those who speak out and tell the truth. You'll see their testimony in some of the videos that are there, the Joseph Jackson and some of the polygamy ones. It's well documented. So you may have heard people calling Joseph Smith names because of being involved with 14-year-old girls and taking other men's wives and saying that he's a convicted con man. I'm aware of a court hearing he had. He was thrown in jail like 40 times. And it wasn't all just persecution, but he got off a lot. However, when they talk about convicted, he probably would have been convicted of inciting a riot and violating the First Amendment, destroying the press, destroying private property, possibly treason and adultery, which is punishable as illegal, as a criminal act, had he not been killed in Carthage. But that's speculation at this point whether he would have been convicted, although there's evidence, like we say, the church shows him married to about 33 women, about 10 of which were other men's wives. In other words, it kind of looks like they're trying to make it look better than it was by saying he was married to them, when actually he was not married by any legal standard. And like I said, with Fanny Alger, it's 3 years before the whole Kirtland Temple Elijah thing, or at least a couple of years, and long before the 132 doctrine was ever supposedly revealed or even gained. So looking into the original documents, we get a much different story than what we're told after we get the spin on it in the correlated materials. That's what I'm saying. And I go to the details here so you can see that. The purpose of this is to give enough detail so you can understand these are very real issues. And in order to document that, I've got a lot of videos because it takes time to do that, and I'm not making this a 16-hour video here. And what we will find when we get into the investigation done in Nauvoo, the undercover basically by Joseph H. Jackson, and as I said, corroborating testimony is given by Sarah Pratt and others to the effect that there were hundreds of women involved in the spiritual wife system. It doesn't even resemble polygamy, Mormon polygamy, as you've been told that it was. Polygamy, essentially, according to Sarah Pratt, grew out of a cover for it being discovered that something was going on. The whole sealing thing grew. She says it grew out of that. It was more of a wife for the night, and there were many hundreds of women involved in Nauvoo, according to people that testify, saying that they'd never seen such iniquity. And many of them were just taken complete advantage of by Joseph Smith and a small number of men he had as friends who were involved with this, including Hiram and John C. Bennett, who got caught and was excommunicated to save face, according to the way this history goes. You'll have to determine whether you believe it or not, but as you begin to see the discrepancies in what we're told and what can be proven, the testimonies of people who are otherwise have impeccable characters seems to be much more valued for evidence than those who contradict themselves constantly and are caught in their lies, which unfortunately we find is the case with those we have been told are kind of like Paul Bunyan as far as, being a folk hero and just an amazing person. And what we find is that's not what factual evidence shows in many cases. Things that are being denied are provably occurring.
Okay, there we got something on the Mormon Truth Video Library. My first vision stuff's documented all sorts of things regarding the whole issue, and 1821st vision, Joseph Smith's family they certainly give evidence that they never believed any such thing happened. So does Brigham Young and other of the apostles. It just is completely, and it goes against other historical facts, some of the things he says. Now we've got secret combinations unveiled. The secret society network operating in the world and in the United States, behind the scenes, controlling a lot of things. I've done a lot of research on that, and they've got physical financial structures that are very well documented in certain even government reports. And we see the LDS leaders cooperating with satanic secret society members in government, and that's really interesting. These videos are the one that says secret combination unveiled. That's the better of those two. Basically, it's a redo of the one underneath it, but I left the other one in there so far anyway, even though it's shorter, has less information, and I got better pictures in the longer one. It's got a lot of great information in it. How honest is the race and priesthood? Again, that one that's a redo. It's new and improved. I think it's got a lot of pictures. Same thing like I did with several of these, and got all the Joseph Jackson stuff from Nauvoo, which is very, very revealing of a completely different LDS history than you learn in the church. And so we've got original source documents. We've got things showing that that the brethren are completely dishonest on LDS.org. It's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of fact, and I document it. I'll just show, here's what they say, here's what the scriptures say, this is what they say is the truth, here's what the scriptures say, etc. Here's what they say they're going to do, and then here's what they do. There's nothing tricky or sophisticated about it. We just look at what they do, and they're completely dishonest. And we can show that Joseph Smith was dishonest from the beginning. We have things that are definitive of that. There's things that are suspicious, and then there are things that are just proven fact where he was not honest. And what we find is that Mormon apologists and those who are would-be apologists, they like to scream and yell and call everyone a liar, anti-Mormon, apostate, etc. Every dirty thing that they can say to try to discredit someone, but they rarely are able to come up with much factual information, or they'll look for some little thing to nitpick over and then try to say everything somebody says or does is wrong. Jesus only has to lie once. He only has to lie once for us to know that it's not true, for us to know that he's not abiding by his own law, in which he said he would cease to be God in the Book of Mormon. So
there really isn't any room for us to, for the LDS scriptures to be contradicting each other, for the brethren to be caught lying or contradicting previous scripture. We're told the prophet will never lead us astray, all these sort of things. So we look into these things in detail in these videos. These are some of the real issues that I found to be very important. Other people like to talk about anachronisms in the Book of Mormon, like, hey, they didn't have steel or horses or sheep or goats or money or elephants or bees, scientific issues. And those are very valid concerns. It may be difficult to prove them 100%, but, it looks pretty rough when there's like a 99% chance that, yeah, there were no bees or no elephants hanging out when these Nephites were supposed to be here, or they didn't have steel mills, or what happened to all their armor and swords that were, when hundreds of thousands of them were supposedly killed right next to Joseph Smith's house there at the Hill Cumorah, and what happened? Did the Lamanites collect them all and melt them down in their own steel mill, and then aliens came and took the swords away? Give me a break. You have to go through so many mental gymnastics to try to make things work in some of these stories. And we get into that Book of Mormon stories. Some of them are just outlandish. We've got not Joseph Smith, we've got Lehi's family traveling to the Red Sea in 3 days from Jerusalem. It's like 250 miles. It's about half that maybe to some tributary that's entering into it. 3 days. Not happening. What do they have? Magic camels? They're carrying tents and they have their whole family. And then they go back and forth, the boys do. He chops off Laban's head, and it's so bright at night that he can tell the sword's made out of steel, and the hilt thereof is pure gold. You can't tell that for sure in the daylight, with the gold. Gemologists will test it. But it's so bright he can see that, and he chops the guy's head off, and nobody happens to notice him. He finds him out in the open. He just sees him when he's walking along towards his house. And then he chops off his head. Blood would be everywhere, but he puts the guy's clothes on without any blood on him. He goes and hangs out with the guy's servant and pretends he's Laban, says he speaks in his voice. What does he have, a Halloween mask on? Come on. Are we supposed to imagine, knight in shining armor with a faceplate on to go out partying at night? He was out partying and drunk. There's things in there that are so ridiculous it's unbelievable. And that's exactly the point. It's unbelievable. Many of the things are unbelievable. But we have Jesus Christ contradicting himself. That should be it in itself. Taking all these things into consideration, people find it amazing that people stay members of the church. But most members of the church are not aware of these massive contradictions, and the church's history has been covered up so well by the church's correlation department and the public relations that members of the church are unaware of the actual history of the church. Information control is used heavily, and we show how tactics are used on LDS.org as examples of that. Everything else is made to appear suspect. Anyone who doesn't believe is an evil anti-Mormon apostate working for the devil. And these are classic techniques used in organizations that are called high control organizations that use what is called coercive persuasion tactics. That is another term which has a loaded meaning. In other words, things are associated in our minds with it that may not be completely accurate, and that's called mind control. You needn't think of someone walking around as a zombie or a robot, but minds are conditioned. It's done on the media. It's done in many different venues very effectively, and if you study these things or see them in other organizations and then you walk into the church and see it being used, it can be really eye-opening, and that's an experience that I've had. Because I was aware of certain psychological techniques, and then I said, what are they doing that for in church? And you think, oh, well, can you think of a rationalization? Because your mind is programmed to do that. Oh, I've got to find a way to stick a round peg into a square hole here, make this work for my belief system, or put it on the shelf and say God will explain it in the millennium. And at some point, you just go, you know what? What, is Jesus just, the devil just copies techniques from Jesus? Or Jesus just likes to use mind control to help make sure people obey him and don't sin? Okay. There's a point where this just gets to be too much. And that's when your shelf breaks. So that's different for a lot of people depending on their level of conditioning and what they've been exposed to. Let me give a quick example of information control. The Journal of Discourses contains the talks given, at the time of Brigham Young in General Conference. General Conference talks by the prophets and apostles. These are considered scripture. That's what we call scripture today. In the Ensign General Conference report. Well, every family was supposed to have a copy of that, and then they were recalled by the church. We do not find them on LDS.org.
they're just not readily available for us. In fact, I haven't seen the documentary history of the church on LDS.org either. What we do is we get correlated materials, the portions they want to pull and give us in lessons that work out. But what we don't see is the things that they taught as the Word of God, revelation, God's law, as Brigham called it, which are now called, the false theories of men and denounced or ignored by the brethren. Some of them are specifically denounced in the Race and Priesthood Gospel Topics essay, which has been hiding on LDS.org, even though they said they wanted us to know all these things and so forth, but they've been hiding them because they don't want you to know there's a problem, but if you do, then they're there. So, the Adam God doctrine, the blood atonement doctrine, the men on the moon, men on the sun, all these things that just, don't sound good, so they're hidden. It's called information control. And if you talk about it too much, well, then there's other control. On top of that, you got the fact that when you're contradicting doctrine, when you're changing doctrine, if you can just bury it and it never happened, that's a whole lot better than, basically showing that Jesus can't make up his mind. Just like he couldn't make up his mind what to name the church till the third time. All sorts of things. Which is why they tried to cover that up, and they lied about that too. The obvious problem with that being an all-knowing, all-wise God wouldn't be contradicting himself and changing his mind. Now, would he?
So, plural marriage, dishonesty in it, contradictions in the scriptures, contradictions regarding concubinage and polygamy between the Doctrine and Covenants and the Book of Mormon. That's been debated. But the same two guys are cited with the same two actions, being David and Solomon. The Lord condemns them supposedly through the prophet Jacob and calls what they did whoredom and abomination in Jacob chapter 2, I believe, maybe chapter 3 as well in the Book of Mormon, whereas their actions are specifically condoned in section 132. Also, this doctrine, coupled with what was in Hosea, supposedly, is said to be the doctrine preached, the secret doctrine preached to the women who were being seduced by Joseph Smith and his group of his inner circle who were practicing the spiritual wife system in Nauvoo. Much different from what polygamy is portrayed to be by the church in its, in its official materials. An incredibly different reality from what is taught. The temple, Masonry. How much do you know about Masonry? Is it Luciferian? Well, their highest ranking people, their most acclaimed people like Albert Pike and Manly P. Hall say, yes, it is Luciferian. There are various quotes of them talking about the pure doctrine of Lucifer or Master Masons, needing to harness the seething energies of Lucifer, etc. Things that are known at the higher degrees. And I don't want to pretend that I'm an expert on Masonry, but these things are certainly not in harmony with someone who believes themselves to be anything close to Christian. Although the Christian church has murdered probably more people than anyone in the world under Catholicism, the burning people at the stake, the millions of people killed at the Inquisitions, and we're supposed to believe that Christianity is good. Of course, most Christians want to separate themselves from the Catholic Church, but Mormonism basically says that the Catholic Church corrupted Christianity and needed to be restored. So they say the Christians are just apostates who didn't have divine restoration, just tried to reform things from the Catholic Church, so they're caught in the middle, and only Mormonism is true. Masonry in the temple. Some people take videos of things that secretly and so forth, and they like to talk about the secret stuff of Masons. That's not a subject I'm going to discuss, but as far as bringing Masonry into the temple, what we have is that Joseph Smith claimed that that the temple endowment was revealed from God and would not be changed. It was eternal. It's been changed quite a bit, as is documented. You can see things on the internet about that, or you may not want to look at that, a lot of specifics, but the point is that about 7 weeks after Joseph Smith was initiated into the York Rite of Freemasonry and became a Master Mason, which is only the 3rd degree, however, at that time, he reintroduced the endowment with new material in it, and that can be read about if you so choose to do. And it had elements of Freemasonry, certain rituals and so forth. So this is obviously beyond suspicious. Are we to believe that God just revealed to him things to put into the endowment right when he joined the Freemasons, and that's how the Freemasonry got into the endowment, because God revealed it to him. Well, then why did he join them? Why did he form the Danites using, Masonic sorts of agreements? Of course, he actually did that before becoming a Freemason. Now, they weren't using necessarily Freemasonic rituals, just patterning the organization as far as taking, blood oaths and so forth to serve him at all hazards and whatever was necessary, including murder, treason, etc. So these things don't seem to be in harmony. Neither does the word of wisdom. Joseph Smith obviously didn't obey the word of wisdom. He drank till the day he was, killed. And there are plenty of journal entries, including his own, that verify that, as well as Brigham Young, and he was in the liquor business or wine business, and they had the church in the business, and it gets ridiculous when you look at it. It's you go, yeah, are you kidding me? So, also with regard to the temple, people object to the fact that the missionaries come and teach people, the milk of the gospel, supposedly, using the letters from Paul there with the milk and meat theory of how people should be taught. And in order to obtain eternal life, and have your family be together forever, you got to do that in the temple with being, sealed together in the temple. In order to do that, people have to take certain covenants in what's called the endowment. And that's where the Masonic stuff occurs. However, which are basically associated with certain covenants being made. Do people really need to have secret handshakes to get into heaven? Well, Brigham Young says yes. He says the endowment will give you all this, whatever, signs, tokens, etc., to give to the angels and the sentinels that stand, and gain your, between you and the celestial world, and gain your eternal exaltation in spite of earth and hell, or words to that effect. So, really? So people question that. The other thing is, basically in the temple, people are making covenants that they will give everything, anything and everything to the church, and to build up, the kingdom of God, and which the church is associated with. The kingdom of God is basically the Council of 50, is the government of God. And people aren't told what they're going to be agreeing to until the time that they, hear that. So they've done all this sort of thing. They're if they pay their tithing and so forth, and then they're told, hey, it might be more. It might be everything you got. It might be building fund. It might be callings. They're not to say that you aren't told you could have callings, but the level of commitment is greater, and people feel that full disclosure is not made, and it's not. So it doesn't seem honest. It's possible, I would think, to discuss what people are going to be agreeing to or covenanting to without having to worry about secret handshakes and so forth, that they basically, the Masons said, that if you reveal, they'd kill you. And this gets into the whole thing where Mormons are accused of racism because blacks couldn't have the priesthood, starting with about 1852. Although Joseph Smith wrote scripture that basically said that was, against God's law in the Book of Abraham and the Book of Moses, which is contradicted in the Gospel Topics essays, of course. And my thought on that is that Freemasonry is or was completely segregated, at least at that time. And since rituals that contain things that they, used as secret signs and so forth, just like as described in the Book of Mormon, with their secret societies there, are used in the temple. And if they were revealed to someone who was not allowed in a Masonic lodge, such as a Negro going to a white lodge, I know that I've heard that there are black lodges, a black order. I think Obama supposedly is said to have belonged to one. You can tell by the satanic signs he uses that he's into some kind of Satanism, as basically most of the presidents we've got pictures of doing that, giving satanic signs. So it's different. So in other words, they couldn't have blacks going into the York Rite, which Joseph Smith was in. So if he's revealing stuff, if he's using it in the temple, he's got to make people Masons, which they were doing. Now, how's that work with women? I'm not exactly sure. There's a lot of Masonic language involved with the creation of the Relief Society, which just happened to be done the day after he was initiated in Freemasonry. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. We find Masonic language throughout the Doctrine and Covenants after Joseph Smith was initiated. Do these things sound like they're from the all-knowing, unchanging God? You can answer that. These are some of the things that people notice that don't seem to go along with the story. the story in the Book of Mormon, the story of the development of the church, as being guided by Jesus Christ and the description that's given of him. Then again, the Old Testament describes pretty much Yahweh, the war god of the Jews, and how basically he became, a mono, the only god, supposedly, or the only god they were to worship. And there are many anachronisms in the Bible. Moses, supposedly writing about things which happened long after he was dead, and there are ridiculous genealogies between in New Testaments, between Matthew and Luke. How many generations were between Joseph and David? Is it 28 or is it 43? Who are the people? And, where were the apostles after Jesus died when he appeared to them? Tons of conflicts. These are pointed out by Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense, which helped to instigate the American Revolution, so he's pretty famous for that. Later he wrote The Age of Reason, and cataloged things in the Bible, which basically, he asked, why should we just say this is the Word of God? Some Jews wrote a story in Genesis, and so forth, and why is it the Word of their God? Why is it? And where's the credibility? And what does it say? And does it contradict itself? And, you can find it at sacredtexts. Probably .org, maybe it's .com, or you can find it somewhere and buy it. But you can just read it online, and he catalogs things right there in the scriptures, and you can look at them and see what you think. He was pretty bright and pretty sensible, and there isn't anything mystical about it. You just it's right there in the Bible, and you can see. Same thing as the Book of Mormon. Mormonism's a little easier to notice some of the massive contradictions. It's just too obvious at some point, although many people seem to be oblivious to it. So my videos point things out that help you to evaluate, using your own mind, whether or not things are congruent, whether or not the story stays the same, if it's straight or if it's contradicting, if people are telling the truth or if they're making things up and lying and covering up, and can we see that clearly or not? Or is it like they tell us on LDS.org, which they lead us to believe that it's impossible to figure anything out on our own, and that we just need to pray about it, and then Jesus will tell us by the Holy Spirit that the gospel is true. And of course, if we don't receive that, it must be because we're not righteous enough to be given enough faith by the Lord to receive a witness of the Holy Spirit. Basically, so it's our fault. If you've ever heard God gave you a brain, so use it, that might be the thing to listen to, rather than God gave you a brain, so just don't use it. Take things on faith. Faith seems to be the ability to ignore facts and using your mind and reasoning. Faith seems to be the ability to believe things that don't make sense, that contradict fact. Not theory, but fact. So, there are some major issues. I'm sure I haven't named them all, but these are some of the things that seem to make a lot of sense to me, and some of the things that I have focused on in the videos that I have done to document and catalog where to find the information that will lead you to see if we have a consistent story or one filled with contradiction and dishonesty.